with Janet Lee Berg. We're talking about her book, Restitution. I have a wonderful copy right here. And her previous book is Rembrandt's Shadow, and we also have that one here. So if you're interested in the book, I hope you'll check it out. It looks absolutely lovely, and I can't wait to read it. So I'm going to do a little bit of a bio for Janet, and then if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat window, and I'll ask them for Janet. And then we'll be all set. She's going to talk to us about her book for a little bit. So a little bit about Janet Lee Berg. She earned her master's degree in creative writing at Stony Brook University, where she was mentored by many published professors such as Ursula Heggie, Stones from the River, and Frank McCourt from Angela's Ashes. Employed as a journalist by Dan's Papers of the Hamptons and Manhattan for 12 years, Miss Berg was afforded the opportunity to interview numerous celebrities, including actress Isabella Rossellini and one of her favorites, Linda Ronstadt. She also wrote a parody of the Hamptons titled Glitz of the Hamptons, which Pulitzer cartoonist, playwright, and screenwriter Jules Feiffer endorsed as a beautifully told and somehow resonating story. Berg's work has been featured in numerous newspapers and magazines on Long Island, New York, and the Post and Courier, Charleston, South Carolina, and interviewed on 25 radio shows nationwide and local television. Her debut novel, Rembrandt's Shadow, received a glowing critique in Historical Novels Review magazine, and she published a children's picture book called Kitty the Cargo Ship to inspire empathy and kindness. We are so thankful to have you here, Janet. Thank you for joining us.
Jackie, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate your patience. It's not your fault. Trust me, it's probably my fault, not technological. But I really am happy to be here. I see Lori. Hi, Lori.
Hey.
So
I'm here too.
Oh, hi, Doug. How are you?
Good.
This is great. So Lori was my sidekick back in the day. I'll have to tell you about that later. We got into a little trouble sometimes back in the day. So anyway, it took me 13 years to get both books out. Rembrandt's Shadow was my debut novel, and Restitution is the standalone sequel. I like to always talk about a backstory, how these books came about, more like about family and the real family behind the family in the book. So to sum it up, to be more time efficient, I will read this little paper I wrote. It's a story behind the story. Born during the innocence of the 50s, I came of age during the chaos of the 60s on the middle of Long Island in a town called Massapequa, which was nicknamed Matzo Pizza for all the Jews and Italians. Back in the day, that's what we nicknamed it. And families from the city and Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx wanted to get their children out into fenced-in yards and play stickball out in the streets and build forts in the woods. And so everybody that I knew was in the same situation. They wanted to escape. So this is where we all met in Massapequa. And I met a boy named Bruce Berg, nice Jewish boy, nice Catholic girl. Janet Marino was my maiden name. And we went to the same grammar school. We started dating when I was 15 and Bruce was 16. And I looked at our similarities more than our differences. And I found it to be more romantic that way, actually. And I always thought of the book Anne Frank and the way she looked into Peter's eyes, his blue eyes. And I always looked at Bruce's blue eyes like that to get a little romantic here. And he was kind of a rebel, and I was attracted to that. Two rebels, interfaith relationships, which were more frowned upon back in those days than they are today, thank goodness. And it kind of bothered me at a young age why people needed to label each other. I felt like we're all pretty equal, and we should understand our differences instead of listening maybe to our parents, not that my parents did, but in general, you know, the different ethnic groups, religions, and cultures. And instead of looking at that, I thought it was a kinder thing to do. My mom always said her religion was more about kindness than anything. So I wasn't that religious, and neither was my husband. I started writing a love story about Vietnam, actually, because that's the era I grew up in. And one night, to back it up a bit, when we were teenagers, one night while we were parked in the car as teenagers do, Bruce told me that his family history, his grandfather was a big art dealer in Holland. He was very well known with his brother. They had a gallery, 2 galleries, and Hitler had targeted the gallery. This was back in 1938-39, and everyone knew his collection. Benjamin Katz was his name. So Bruce told me a little bit about how his grandfather was forced to trade a Rembrandt to the Nazis in exchange for lives, but that's all he knew. The family didn't talk about it. And back in those days, they wanted to forget. You know, it was too painful, and there were a lot of secrets, a lot of dark secrets that they kept. Anyway, so Hitler's right-hand man, Hermann Goering, was sent in by Hitler to the family home with a gun in his pocket, and he pointed to the masterpieces that he desired for Hitler, even for himself, because he was also an art connoisseur. And by the way, Hitler was a frustrated artist himself who was rejected by a prestigious art school. And on the panel were, I don't know how many Jews, but there were Jews on the panel, and he was resentful of that. So the family, as long as they had canvases to trade to the Nazis, they were kept alive. But how long could the canvases last? That is the question. And they were always on edge. They felt much duress. And they knew that it was a matter of time. So they were temporarily protected. For a while, they didn't have to wear the Jewish star, but then they did. And they had to bargain. It was trading canvases for lives. It was almost like a Sophie's kind of choice they had to make. They had a very large family, 90 people in all, and 25 had escaped. 65 did not escape. So what happened was 5 days after the occupation, which was May of 1940, May 5th to be exact, the Queen Wilhelmina abandoned the people and she left for England. Now, they had that against them. They also had antiquated weaponry, and they had, the terrain was very flat. They didn't have any forest or mountains to hide in. And so they had to surrender in a short time. Let's see what else I could tell you why I think they were doomed. They didn't believe this was really happening. And I think we can kind of relate to that today. You know, you push off in politics, you push off, what is this really happening? And is this pandemic really happening? So these frightening times were not looked at like they were real. This cannot be happening to us. And actually, we had my husband's second cousin, David, 100 years old, just passed last year. And we were on the phone with him. He lived in Switzerland. And he told us stories about hiding Rembrandts in the trunk of his car, and hiding in open graves from the brown shirts, and getting beaten up, and many little stories. And he was on, what was the name of that show? American Heroes channel. I forget, the Nazis History Channel, the American History Channel. of it was called, oh my gosh, I should have written this down. Goering's Greed. You could look it up. And you can see Cousin David at 100 years old talking about the family's terror. They looked in the faces of pure evil. So as I said, Goering came into the family home. Now, at one sitting, these very smart businessmen, Nathan and his brother, Benjamin, were forced to trade 500 paintings at one sitting, with something they never would have done. And they were very shrewd, the Nazis. They had invoices drawn up as if it was a legit deal, and they were doing everything right, which is not the case. They were offered, I think, 10% value of what the paintings were worth. So the big trade was made on October 20th, 1942, when the family was escorted to the train station. And at the last moment, this painting had traded hands, and they got the German officials' signature to authorize the deal to encode on a telegram to send them the 25 visas. So at the last moment, they boarded the train, and the family really didn't know if they could trust these Nazis, of course. So they didn't know if the train doors would open to their freedom or to the death camps. So that was a frightening ordeal. They boarded a boat in at the border of Spain. Let me see if Bilbao, I think it's called. I don't even know how to pronounce it, Bilbao in Spain. And they got on the ship and they went out to sea, and they were afraid of U-boats. So it was one ordeal after another. The sister, the eldest sister, who did not make it out of the camp alive, was stuffed into a cattle car called the Lost Transport. And she was in this cattle car with 2,500 Jewish prisoners. 550 perished, including her. And two of the brothers had committed suicide after the war. So you can imagine the duress, and even if you had survived, the guilt of having survived. So I always think about that, the guilt that goes with survival. My husband said his mother never really talked about those days. They were the silent generation. And I feel 6 million of these stories should be told. And I feel like each story represents another 6 million stories. And I've read many statistics and very thick books on the cold statistics of the numbers of nearly 70 million people dying, not just the Jews, just everyone that weren't desirable people to Hitler, including 1.5 million children. I mean, it's horrific. My books don't go into the horrors really too much, but there's one scene that I always like to explain briefly as the epitome of how disgusting these monsters were. And there were mothers in labor, and on the birthing table, at the end of the birthing table, they would have buckets of water and just drown the infant immediately. So anyway, these are the characters, the real characters in my husband's family's life. And I chose to write fiction and embellish these characters somewhat. We had Lynn Nicholas, who is the author of The Rape of Europa. It's a documentary about 3 or 4 hours long, which is incredible. And it shows all the artwork going to the Lynn's Museum. She's the world's leading expert on art pilfered during World War II. So I got my research done by Lynn Nicholas because we're trying to get back this artwork that was stolen from the family. So I feel very fortunate to have these facts. We worked with the Dutch Restitution Committee for many years, and they threw us a bone about 7 years ago and gave us one painting back. And we're still trying to get back 144 works of art. It's incredible. So in my Riches to Rags story, I talk about my main character, Sylvie Rosenberg, who I designed after my mother-in-law. And people ask me sometimes, well, was she really like that? Or, she wasn't always likable. And my mother-in-law was a very funny woman, and she was so colorful, such a complex character. And I didn't want to make her a Pollyanna type because she came out of the Holocaust after all. And I thought of Madame Bovary and how she's not a likable character either, but it makes a more interesting character to write about. So my mother-in-law and the character in my book, Sylvie, had turned in feet, like she shuffled along with her turned in feet, very childish. She had a love and a tenderness toward animals. She had this funny accent, and she was hard of hearing, so she would say funny things. And so to me, she's so lovable. And I hope that comes out in the book, especially when you see these endearing things about her. So I was fortunate enough to have my books in the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Found a home there. And I got a front cover blurb from Anne Marie O'Connor, and she is the author of The Lady in Gold, or The Woman in Gold, which was a movie starring Helen Mirren. Now, before I end this little talk, and you could ask questions, in 2008, my family we were very thrilled to go to the actual home that my mother-in-law grew up in, and my characters are designed after. So we walked in this home, and we were allowed in by a doctor who was renovating the home, and he's kept it true to what it looked like originally. It's a 3-level brick house, and on the floor, we saw broken Delft tiles around the fireplace and remnants of wallpaper. And I got goosebumps. You know, I saw my characters come alive that I had written about without ever being in this home. And it was just what my mother-in-law had described to me. So I pictured the ghosts of these children running up and down the stairs. And I was very fortunate to be there. Now, I think of how Hermann Goering signed the final solution with the stroke of his pen, and how Rembrandt saved so many lives with the stroke of a brush. Now, remember when you ask questions that the historical facts are true, but I did embellish with the characters, so they're more fictionalized, but I tried to paint a picture of them best that I could. And there you go. I could give a synopsis of both books whenever you're ready. And that's it.
Wonderful. That was actually going to be my first question, was how you came to this story. So that's excellent. How did you decide on her name? Because I assume you didn't use your mother-in-law's name, right?
No, her real name, by the way, is Vogue, like the magazine.
Okay.
Which fit her perfectly because she was always into fashion and design, and always talked about back in the day in Holland eating the finest chocolates. And, you know, she liked to remember all the good things and didn't really talk about the horrors.
How old was she? So this is pretty closely based on her experiences, right?
Yes. So in the first book, in Rembrandt's Shadow, which is this one, she is a teenager, and then in the second book, it is 40 years later in Restitution. Yeah.
And I did find links to the TV series you were talking about.
Oh,
And
did you?
yeah, I put it in the chat window if anybody wants to see that.
Oh, good. With David,
I,
Katz, Katz, Herman's Greed,
it was
Goerings. Gosh,
Go
I should have written it down.
Goings or something. Yeah,
I have
Goings Greed.
papers all over the place right now. It's so
So
much information.
when you wrote it, did it take speaking of information, you said you started 10 years ago. Um, have you been spending that most of that time researching or writing?
Well, I'll tell you, back in '97, I thought of the Vietnam book, and then very interesting little tidbit is we came back from a family vacation, and I see on the kitchen counter, my son had cut out a New York Times article that said, family seeks restitution or something like that, the title. They saw art at the Rijksmuseum in Holland, and that art looked very familiar on the walls. So they started delving into it, and this got all the relatives coming out of the woodwork. Really, is that our art? Is that our art? And so then I thought, well, stop the presses. I have to write about the Holocaust. So that is why I juxtaposed the two wars. And I feel like that's like really perfect in a way, because one generation comes from the one before it, and we're all still learning, and we're all covering our past in some way, and trying to patch the wounds of our parents' past. So the World War II, they didn't talk about it. Vietnam War, it was on TV in our living rooms for the first time. People are sharing it and talking about it, and it's the hippie generation, and we did talk about it. We lost quite a few friends in Vietnam, unfortunately.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's terrible.
Speaking of, one of our attendees just asked a question. Her name's Maggie. She said, "I love Restitution and look forward to reading Rembrandt's Shadow as well. Did you find it difficult to spend so long dwelling in this horrible time for such a large part of your life?" Since you said you were
Great question. So it did take 13 years. I mean, I'd have a break in between. I went back to school at an old age, had great professors. It was hard. I remember I would sit at the computer at 8 o'clock in the morning. My husband would go off to work, and he would come in at like 6 o'clock expecting dinner, and I didn't even eat lunch. I didn't even look at the clock. I'd be so engrossed in this, and all my dogs kept me company. I had golden retrievers. They were my buddies. And yeah, so I would say I would cry a lot while I was writing, thinking about what these family members went through, what they went through. And my husband's sister, actually, she's 83 today. She's alive. She was on that train. She escaped. She remembers the German shepherds and the guns, and she remembers it. Now I remember also, I always had insomnia, but I remember one dream I had, one nightmare, was this Nazi looming over me, and it was so real, and the most frightening dream I ever had in my life. I have to say, it did affect me very much, Maggie. Thank you for asking that question.
One of the other questions I was thinking of was any of the restitution, was that still kind of based a little bit on, because you kind of moved wars, like you said, you moved from World War II to the Vietnam War. Was that still kind of based on some of your mother-in-law's experiences, or was that more personal experience or someone else that you were thinking about?
It's more our generation. So the secondary characters are actually loosely based again on my husband and myself, because you write what you know. And we lived those days of Woodstock. My husband was at Woodstock. And he always feels guilty, like, my friends went to Vietnam and I went to Woodstock. So he started writing, he plays guitar, he started writing a song about that recently, and he really can't get past a few lines. It's just, that again, guilt, yeah. So it's more our generation. I mean, his mom was of course around, but she already had her war. It's crazy.
Maggie also added that she liked she enjoyed the juxtapositions and similarities between World War
Oh,
II and
good. Thank you.
Vietnam. She said, "I applaud you for daring to live in the loss to ensure that we all really know about it." Because you kind of have to engross yourself in that to really write about it. So
Yes,
so important to share.
definitely.
What was a part of writing it? We talked about the part that was very scary and very difficult. What was the part that you just really enjoyed writing? Was there?
Yeah, it's funny because I think drawing these characters out, fleshing them out was fun for me. Like I said, I'd make Sylvie a little naughty, and I had fun doing that. And I had fun with the secondary characters too. You see more of Sylvie, the main character, through their lens. So that I enjoyed, and I also enjoyed with the second book, I put humor in there because my mother-in-law really was funny. I would go in a supermarket with her, and because she was hard of hearing, she would be yelling all over this. We lived down the country in the Hamptons area, and she would be yelling all over the supermarket. I'd be on the other side of the store and she'd be yelling, "Janet, do you need?" And she'd hold up like a head of lettuce or something. And she'd be wearing these crazy clothes, like, because she was into clothes, and purple velvet platform shoes. And I was like, oh my gosh, but got a kick out of her. And in the second book, I fit, and she often told me that people said that she reminded them of Lucy. I love Lucy. So, and I definitely can agree with that.
I love
So
that.
that was fun. Yeah, that was fun.
Good, good.
Oh, and the romantic part with Michael and Angela. Yeah.
Yeah, I read some bits from that part, and it sounded very real and honest, and I loved that. Um,
Thank you, Jackie.
I'm not sure. It just says iPhone, but have you considered another book? I wonder about the baby and the characters in Restitution we're trying to adopt.
Oh, oh. Um, well, I don't want to give it away. It's in Restitution.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in there.
Any other books on the way?
I did think about a third. Actually, I was thinking of getting away from the family
Okay.
and writing about, but I'm not going to do it. It's just, that takes too much out of me at this age. I was going to write about Hitler's love, Hitler's niece. It's his half sister's daughter. And I thought, wow, imagine a story from her eyes, but no, I'm not going there. But I do have a children's book. It's about dogs, downtown Charleston. And it's a real calamity, and it's based on 2 real dogs, and it's for early readers, and it's adorable. The illustrator's working on it right now.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too.
How has the publishing experience been for you? Because you've been in a lot of different parts of publishing. So you've done adult fiction, you've now done kids books, and you were a journalist. So what are the differences?
Oh my gosh.
Or which ones do you like better?
Well, it's a tough industry, I have to say. It's exciting. Rejections stink. I remember just holding on to one in particular years ago with Rembrandt Shadow, that it was with a big publishing firm. It was with a big agent who put out Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club. And she said the second reader's really into it. And I was like, yes, it never took hold. But I remember when I was in school, went back to school, and we would talk about how tough the industry is. I think it's 2% chance of getting published by one of the top 5. And if you can do that, then it's a home run. mostly you should reach out to independent publishers. I would say if this is what you really love doing, go for it. You have to also know that even if you never get published, a story like this, like if you have any history or anything, it could be any family type story that has some guts to it, for your children, passed down to your grandchildren or someday, because I don't know much about my own family history, but I do know more, of course, about my husband's.
Do you still work as a journalist, or is that?
No, I'm writing a little dog article right here in the community paper that you interview dogs. So that would be fun. And the dog book's coming out, and that's about it. Now I'm into art. I'm painting.
That's one of the things I was going to ask is how much did you learn about art from writing this book? Or were you already very into it?
No, it came back. I remember, it's funny because I went back to school at an old age. So I remember with Lori
You don't look old enough to say that, by the way.
Yeah, right. I'm old. I'm very old. But Lori Kruppa is here with us. And Lori and I were stewardesses together. And so, what was the question again?
About art.
Art. Okay. So when we went on our 6-week trip around, we hitchhiked around Europe. We got into some little trouble there. Lori can attest to that. And we went into so many museums. And I have to say, looking at the art, I didn't know anything about art. Well, when we got home from that trip, I have to say that I did take an interest in art history, and I got an associate's degree in fine arts, and then I went back and I got my BA in English, and then I went back for creative writing and got my MA. So it all came back, but so I wish I had started earlier. Let's put it that way. But I don't know really perspective, proportion, color value, many things about art. I do it the way I write. I do it from, I'm a very emotional person. I do it from emotion. And the funny thing is, just a couple of months ago, an art lawyer, very interesting concept, an art lawyer contacted me, and there's a podcast on my website, janetleeberg.com. You could Google the podcast, and she's an art lawyer. Her name is Stephanie Drawdy. And she's supposed to have given a presentation on Rembrandt shadow and restitution in London at London's Victoria and Albert Museum to the Jewish art dealers there. And she's an artist, though, and a lawyer, and she likes to find a balance between the two, because you could get to learn so much about emotions of people through art. And I often found that interesting myself, that what was it about the art that the Nazis fancied so? Was it the innermost feelings of people that they didn't have themselves? Were they trying to feel something they obviously couldn't feel? And so I do find it interesting. And I hope this art lawyer, Stephanie, because of the pandemic, she couldn't do it this month. Next year, it's pushed a whole year to go and do the presentation. And I can't wait for that. So we'll get the book over in Europe too.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
And I did put Janet's website in the very beginning of the chat for you guys to check out, because she has all of her books on there and her podcast links on there.
Thank you, Jackie.
Sure. So Eileen also asked if you've considered writing a memoir.
Eileen Opser?
She says yes.
No, that's your bag. Eileen Opser, she writes memoirs, and I'm rooting for her. I have to say. We were always on the same page in our writing classes back at Stony Brook on Long Island. And we both shared same classes, same professors, some wonderful professors, I have to say. I'm not sure if Eileen had Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes. He was a professor I had, and wow, I was in awe. Roger Rosenblatt, essayist, Billy Collins, I know, poet laureate. Eileen was in his class. Ursula Heggie, Stones from a River, I was in her class. Yeah, great authored professors. So no, Eileen, no memoir for me.
And since we're such a small group, if anyone wants to ask a question, unmuted.
Sure.
Totally fine. Let me switch the view so I can see. So yeah, that sounds really fun to have met, to still be in contact with wonderful people that you knew at Stony Brook.
Yeah, it's exciting. You know, I started out when I was writing for Dan's papers out in the Hamptons. It's distributed all over Long Island and in Manhattan. And I was extremely shy, and it's just a fluke how I got to write for this paper. And Dan was actually the humor writer, and he let me do it all the time. I guess I can be funny sometimes. So I threw myself in the fire, and he would send me out on assignments and to interview people like Isabella Rossellini. And one time he had me interview the man with the highest IQ in the world, I guess. And we went to a diner, and I'm interviewing this genius, off the chart genius. And I think the last question I had asked him is, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And I stumped him. So I had fun.
And you wrote a parody, is that right? Like a play?
Yes, I don't have the book in front of me now. It's just, see, the Hamptons is well known for the glitz and the glamour and the movie stars and the Ferraris. And, you know, we had a record store downtown. My husband opened a record store here in Charleston, by the way, plug, on John Street. So he's been in the music business for 50 years. And wow, my son still has a record stop. It's called In New York. And anyway, now I've lost track of where we are. What was the question again?
I was just asking about your screenplay.
A screenplay, okay. So we had the record store in West Hampton Beach, and these city people would come walking by, and, you know, they had fancy cars and they really didn't get the country life. They would look at, oh, look how cute that little store is, or look at, like, we were like storybook people. And so I wanted to point out in this book, this parody, that there was more than just all the glitz and the glamour. There were the beautiful beaches and the trails and just the family life and the community and the community spirit we had. And I wanted to point that out through the eyes of a character in this book, which I cannot give away because it'll ruin the ending of the book. But Glitz of the Hamptons.
You've got mail.
Glitz of the Hamptons, it's called. And it's for readers of all ages.
That sounds really fun.
It's a fun book. It's sweet.
So, speaking about characters, back to restitution, do you have a favorite character or?
Well, Sylvie will always be my favorite character. And, you know, my own parents are gone so long now, so many years. And I actually wrote them into the book too. So whenever I read my books, especially the first one, Rembrandt's Shadow, you don't have to read them in order, but it's nice if you do. I see my parents again. It's like, it's great because I feel like the the families were so different. Our two families were so different, yet we were so much alike. The Italians and the Jews with the family get-togethers and the big feasts and eating. And it's all about family and dinner, and it's wonderful. So very similar too. And I like to look at the similarities.
I love that. My family is also Italian Catholic,
Ah,
and so I love.
you can relate.
I think I'll find a lot to relate to in this book.
Good.
So just another question. When you were traveling in Europe and you saw the house where Sylvie, well, or Vogue
Yeah.
grew up, did you see any of their art while you were there, or was that
Well,
kind of a later thing?
well, we did go to the museum. We went to a couple of museums. We went to the Rijksmuseum, and here I am with my little notepad writing down all these numbers because our researcher, Lynn Nicholas, who I talked about, the world's top researcher, had given us so much information, and of course the lawyers too. And so it was very difficult to look at these works and think, is that ours? And if I could have spent days in there, but we did go with a big group. I went with my sister and her family and her kids. And so I don't know how many there were of us, maybe a dozen of us. And it's hard to shuffle around a museum with 12 people. But yes, I did write down numbers, and I felt like a lot that was hanging on the walls were our family's paintings. And it had to kill the family to lose this artwork. It meant so much to them. It was his oxygen. That's what I always say. It's like music is my husband's oxygen, and the art was grandfather's oxygen. So, yeah.
Did they ever, you mentioned a lawyer a couple times, were they ever able to like reobtain any of it? Or
Yes, we got one painting back about 9 years ago, 10 years ago. And it was just enough to pay for the lawyer. So
okay.
that's good for him. But being that case, that was over with the Dutch Restitution Committee. They were tough. They were the stubborn Dutch, as they say. And they threw us a bone with the one painting. But then a few years went by, and my husband, who had retired, I had given him a retirement party in New York, moved here to Charleston, is walking down the street, John Street, near the music hall, and he sees this empty little store, and he said, whoa, what a great location for a record store. And I said, no. He comes out of retirement, so now it's going on almost 3 years, this little record store. And wow, is it stocked. He knows music, so it's stocked so much so it's overflowing. And yeah, he's got great followers now. And let's see now, where am I going with that? Okay, so he goes to meet the landlord of the store, right? And meanwhile, we have no more art claim going. And the landlord says, you know, I have a lawyer that may be interested, a friend that may be interested in your art case. Maybe you could start it. So sure enough, he goes in, he meets this lawyer. I'm not going to give names. And he hops on a plane to Houston, where the firm is, with a bag of papers that we had all saved over the years. And they took this case on contingency, and now they're working on this a couple of years already, and it's looking better than it was. So hopefully there's 144 paintings that we're looking to get back. I don't know how many or if any we'll get back, but we do have high hopes. It's pretty optimistic, and I see that Europe, Holland now, and especially Germany, has changed their ways, and they're making amends. They are doing the right thing in Germany. We're just hoping that Holland follows suit. So yeah, so the lawsuit's going on, but now we're suing the country, the whole country, Bruce Berg against the country. It's crazy.
Well, I hope that you get at least some of those back. That is
Some, yeah, we need more than one bone.
I think being able to have that tangible history would be just incredible.
Yeah, they were hanging on the walls of their 2 galleries, one was in The Hague and one was in Dieren, Holland, where the house was. It was a little smaller gallery. And in the family home, there were etchings and Rembrandts and crazy. So some big names that we hope to get back. It's not theirs. You know, Germany returned it. The monuments men got the paintings, sent it to the right countries, but then they couldn't send it to the individuals because the monuments men, they couldn't possibly do that. So it was up to the country to do the right thing. And they're kind of saying it belongs to them. It doesn't. They have to do the right thing. And if you see the movie, A Woman in Gold, wow, it's just like this family story that I'm telling. It's a wonderful movie. Helen Mirren is awesome. And Rondell Schoenberg is the lawyer who saved the day for that family, the Altmans. So we're hoping someone could save the day here. We need a lawyer with fire in the belly.
So that story really reminds you of your experiences?
So much so. I cried 6 times in that movie. It's great. It's a great movie.
I just plugged in the trailer for it in the chat for you.
Oh yeah. Oh, people love that movie.
It's the book is The Lady in Gold by Anne Marie O'Connor. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Anne Marie O'Connor, great. She's great. I think she lives in she may live in London now. When she had given me the blurb on the front cover, she was in Israel. So I'm not sure where she is all the time, but yeah.
Well, we're getting close to time. I know we started a little late, so I let it go a little late, but
Apologize. Yeah, it's probably partly my fault and my husband's, Bruce. No.
we just had a thing. We figured it out though. It's fine. I'm sorry about that. There was a Bruce that was like, it checked in as soon as I pulled up the Zoom window, and I was like, that's weird. I don't know who that is. And then I called Janet and I was like, Janet, where are you at?
Oh, I see how that happened now. Okay. Oh,
the whole
I
time.
have to remember that. Oh, I better remember that for another time because my memory is not all, here. And wow. So yeah, I better remember that. I used to do, in-person book clubs and luncheons and, this is hard for Zoom for me. I don't know. I have to get used to it. So now I only do it once a month. And so I hope I remember next time, Bruce.
Well, I'm so glad that you came though, and you really made it seem like we were in a little book club, like we all know each other, and that was
yes. Cool. Now, where are you located?
We're in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So
Spartanburg, right?
Not too far from you.
I have to visit you and meet you.
That would be awesome.
I would love it. And
we're starting to do in-person events again in April, so maybe we can do something else then.
I would love it.
And Maggie, who's asking such great questions, she's a Spartanburg home. Her home is Spartanburg.
Oh, good.
Her Spartanburg, but she lives in Oregon.
I hope to meet you too, Maggie.
So, well, she's in Oregon, and she tuned in for our events. Yeah.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay, I won't be going to Oregon anytime soon.
maybe it'll time up with you coming to Spartanburg.
Yeah. So, during a pandemic, it's very hard for authors to, we need support. We need reviews. And support your bookstores and write reviews, Amazon, wherever you do it. Appreciate it. It's a tough gig, but I love it.
Well, thank you for taking the time to check in with us. And I hope everyone will buy your book, this one and this one.
Thank you.
We got both of them in the shop, and I'm really excited that we have them there in the window.
You're the best, Jackie. I appreciate everything you've done.
Sure. And if anyone else has any questions, just shoot me an email. But we're really grateful for everyone who joined us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Eileen.
And Joanne was the other person.
Joanne. Hi, Joanne.
Joanne.
All right, everybody.
Hi, Joanne.
I don't see her, but
no, she's
iPhone.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Joanne. Hi, Eileen. I miss you.
You.
All right. Come
Take
visit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jackie.
Bye. Hi, Eileen.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
That was
Something
great.
about it.